He lost his horse, and when he returned, he brought with him a mysterious Apache woman. Every morning, John would wake up before the sun rose, step into the crisp air of the western plains, and head straight to the stable. Thunder would neigh softly as he approached, shaking his dark mane, as if greeting him personally. They had been together for years, and in all that time, John could not remember a single day when Thunder had disappointed him. That morning, however, there was a strange feeling in the air. The wind blew across the prairie with unusual force, carrying a scent that made John uneasy. He shook off the feeling as he saddled Thunder. Today, he had planned to take the horse to the northern canyon, where some stray cattle had been spotted. The terrain was rough, filled with rocks and sudden drops, but John trusted Thunder completely. As they rode along the narrow trails, the sun rose slowly, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. Thunder moved gracefully, his hooves barely making a sound against the dry earth. John admired the horse's strength and speed. He had spent countless hours training Thunder, running him through steep paths and teaching him to navigate the tricky landscape. Thunder had proven time and again that he could handle anything the wilderness threw at them. But fate had other plans that day. When they reached the canyon, John dismounted to check on the cattle. Some were grazing peacefully, while others wandered dangerously close to the cliffs. He whistled softly, calling them back toward safer ground. Thunder was nearby, grazing on a patch of grass. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the canyon, a sharp crack like a branch breaking or a distant gunshot. Thunder froze, his ears twitching, eyes wide with fear. Before John could react, Thunder bolted. He ran like the wind, muscles rippling, mane flying in the breeze. John shouted, trying to catch his horse's attention, but Thunder did not slow down. Panic surged through John's chest. He ran after him, stumbling over rocks and loose soil, but the canyon was wide and deep, and the horse was fast. No matter how much John yelled or waved, Thunder disappeared into the distance, swallowed by the twisting paths of the canyon. Hours passed. John ran tirelessly, calling Thunder's name until his throat was raw. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape. He sat on a rock, exhausted, heart-pounding, and tried to think clearly. He knew that Thunder had always been brave, but even the bravest horse could get lost in the wild terrain. With night approaching, the dangers multiplied: wolves, mountain lions, or simply the unforgiving cold. John had no choice but to return home. Every step back was heavy, each one reminding him of the empty space where Thunder should have been. The homestead looked smaller, lonelier than ever. John opened the stable doors, hoping against hope, but Thunder was not there. The saddle hung on its hook, unused, and the barn was silent. John's shoulders slumped. Losing Thunder wasn't just about losing a horse. It felt like losing a part of himself, a loyal companion who had been with him through every hardship and joy. That night, John sat by the fire, staring into the flames as they danced and flickered. The wind whistled through the cracks in the wooden walls, carrying with it the sounds of the wild outside. Every sound made him tense, wondering if it was Thunder returning or some other creature wandering too close to his home. He thought of all the places Thunder could have gone, the steep cliffs, the dense forest, the hidden valleys that only John knew. But no matter how hard he thought, he couldn't figure out where the horse might be. The days that followed were filled with restless worry. John scoured the surrounding land every morning, walking mile after mile, following tracks and listening for the familiar sound of hooves. He asked neighboring ranchers if they had seen a lone horse roaming the plains. Some had, but the descriptions were always vague. A dark horse, moving fast, disappeared into the hills. Each sighting brought a spark of hope, quickly replaced by disappointment when it turned out not to be Thunder. John's friends noticed the change in him. He no longer greeted people with the same easy smile, and his laughter was rarer. He worked around the ranch, tending to chores mechanically, his mind always drifting back to the canyon and the horse that had vanished. Thunder had been his partner in every sense, on long cattle drives during storms, through frozen mornings and scorching afternoons. Losing him left a hole that no amount of work could fill. But amid the worry and sadness, a quiet determination began to grow. John would not give up. Thunder had faced challenges before and had always come through. John believed that somewhere out there, his horse was waiting for him, and he promised himself he would not rest until they were reunited. Each morning he saddled a different horse, rode deeper into the canyon, searched hidden trails, and left no stone unturned. The search became his purpose, and every small clue, every hoof print or broken branch became a sign of hope. During this time, John began noticing things he had never paid attention to before. The sound of the wind echoing through the rocks, the tracks of smaller animals leading to water sources, the way the sun fell across the canyon at different times of the day. The wilderness, once familiar and routine, now felt alive in a new way, as if it were silently guiding him towards something important. Each day was hard, and each night was lonelier than the last, but he felt an unspoken connection with the land, almost as if it were testing his patience, his courage, and his heart. On the 5th day of searching, John spotted something unusual, a faint trail leading up a steep slope that he had never noticed before. The tracks were too large for a deer or a coyote. He followed them carefully, heart pounding, wondering if this could finally lead him to Thunder. The path was narrow and treacherous, but John's determination pushed him forward. As he climbed, he thought of every moment he had shared with Thunder, the races across the prairie, the quiet rides at dawn, the nights beside the fire when he would whisper to the horse about his dreams. Each memory strengthened his resolve. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting golden light across the rocks, John reached the top of the slope and paused to catch his breath. In the distance, he saw a dark shape moving gracefully. His heart leapt. Could it be Thunder? He shaded his eyes, squinting, willing himself not to be disappointed. The shape paused, then moved again, confirming his hope. Thunder was out there, alive, somewhere beyond the canyon, waiting to be found. John felt a surge of relief and excitement he hadn't known in days. The long, exhausting search had not been in vain. He knew the journey wasn't over. He would have to approach carefully, ensure Thunder was safe, and bring him back home. But for the first time since the loss, John allowed himself to feel a spark of joy, a sense of hope rekindled. That night back at the homestead, John lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining the reunion. Sleep came slowly, but it came, bringing dreams filled with galloping hooves, open plains, and the bond between a man and his horse that not even loss could break. Deep down, John sensed that this journey, painful and exhausting as it was, would lead him to something unexpected, something beyond just finding Thunder. He didn't know it yet, but the canyon had more surprises in store for him than he could imagine. After days of searching, John felt a mix of hope and exhaustion. Each morning, he saddled a horse borrowed from a neighbor and rode deep into the wilderness, following faint tracks, broken branches, and hoofprints pressed into soft earth. The desert and canyon were harsh, unrelenting, and full of hidden dangers. Every step required caution. Loose rocks threatened to make him slip, sudden drops could easily be fatal, and the blazing sun drained his strength quickly. But John did not stop. The thought of Thunder, his loyal companion, gave him energy he didn't know he had. As John traveled, he began to notice other signs of life he had never paid attention to before. Small tracks of rabbits or deer, faint marks of coyote paws, and the occasional feather left by a bird of prey. Every detail mattered because it all told a story about the land. John realized that the wilderness was alive in ways he had never understood. It had patterns, rules, and messages if someone was patient enough to notice them. He started studying the tracks more carefully, noticing differences in size, weight, and depth. Sometimes he would follow a trail for hours, only to find that it had led him to a small stream or a hidden valley, a place where water and food were plentiful. He would rest there, drink from the stream, and gather strength to continue. On the third day of his search, John came across something unusual. He spotted a small campfire in the distance, its smoke curling into the sky. This was not a settler's camp. He knew every homestead in the area, but it seemed recent. The fire was still warm and the smell of cooked meat lingered faintly in the air. John crouched behind a boulder, watching silently. There were no signs of anyone immediately visible, but he felt a strange sense of being observed. He was not alone in the canyon. Hours passed as John carefully followed the faint smoke and tracks, moving quietly, blending into the landscape. Then from behind a ridge, he caught sight of her for the first time, a woman. She was standing near the campfire, arranging bundles of wood. Her movements were deliberate, graceful, and confident. She was not dressed like a settler or a cowboy. Her clothing was simple, suited for survival in the wilderness. There was an aura of mystery around her, a quiet strength that made John pause. She seemed aware of his presence but did not speak or move toward him. Instead, she simply watched him from a distance, her gaze calm but unreadable. John felt a mix of curiosity and caution. He had heard stories of the Apache people who lived in the mountains and deserts nearby, but he had never encountered one directly. He knew they could be wary of strangers, and he did not want to startle her. Still, he had to focus on finding Thunder, and something told him that this woman might be connected to the horse's disappearance. He stayed hidden for a while, observing her, trying to understand whether she was friend or foe. Over the next few days, John followed her movements cautiously. He noticed that she traveled with purpose, always moving through hidden paths and avoiding main trails. Sometimes, she would pause and seem to listen to the wind or the sounds of the canyon. John realized she had skills he could only imagine: tracking, survival, understanding the land in a way he could not. She was always just out of reach, never interacting with him directly, but always present in his search, almost as if guiding him without words. One afternoon, as John followed a faint trail along the canyon walls, he finally spotted Thunder. The horse was grazing calmly in a small clearing, looking healthy and strong. Relief washed over John so intensely that he almost ran toward him. But then he saw her, the woman, standing beside Thunder, her hand resting gently on his mane. She looked at John for a long moment, then spoke a few words in a language he did not understand. Thunder shifted, nuzzling her hand, calm and familiar. John realized that she had rescued him, cared for him, and protected him in the wild. For the first time, John felt a deep respect and curiosity for this mysterious woman. She had acted with kindness and courage, yet she remained silent, keeping her distance. He did not know her name, her story, or why she had helped Thunder. All he knew was that without her, Thunder might have been lost forever. He wanted to approach to speak, but the woman moved back, signaling him to stay. It was clear that trust had to be earned, not demanded. Over the next day, John observed her carefully, learning from a distance. She gathered food, prepared small traps, and navigated the rocky terrain with ease. Every movement was precise, purposeful, and showed a deep understanding of the land. John realized that she had spent her life surviving in this wilderness, learning its secrets and respecting its dangers. He admired her skill and patience. The realization made him feel both humbled and inspired. He had grown up in the West, worked the ranches, and traveled the plains, but he had never truly understood the depth of survival in the wild. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon, John decided to make a careful approach. He moved slowly, keeping his distance, and called out softly to Thunder. The horse lifted his head, ears pricked, but did not move. The woman stepped forward, holding her hands up to show peace. Her eyes were steady, calm, yet curious. John nodded, acknowledging her presence, and spoke softly, "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want my horse back." She responded with a gesture he did not understand, but it felt like an invitation to follow her. Over the next several hours, a quiet understanding began to form. John followed her through hidden paths, learning to read the signs of the land in the way she did. She pointed to distant tracks, showed him small water sources, and demonstrated ways to move quietly through the desert without alarming wildlife. John realized that every step of this journey was teaching him something new, not just about finding thunder, but about patience, observation, and respect for the wilderness. During this time, John's feelings shifted. He was no longer just searching for a lost horse. He was learning, growing, and connecting with someone who had skills and knowledge he could never have imagined. The woman remained mysterious, speaking rarely, but her actions communicated more than words ever could. John began to understand that life in the wild was about balance, observation, and respect. He saw in her a wisdom that went beyond survival, an understanding of life that was deep and quiet, like the desert itself. By the 5th day of traveling together, John had come to trust her completely. Thunder was healthy, strong, and responsive, and John felt a renewed sense of hope. He realized that losing his horse had led him to an encounter that might change his life forever. The woman had shown him that the world was larger, wilder, and more beautiful than he had known. She had rescued Thunder, guided him safely, and taught him lessons that no book or school could ever provide. As night fell over the canyon, John made a fire and prepared a small meal. The woman sat nearby, her eyes reflecting the flames, calm and observant. John looked at her and felt gratitude, respect, and curiosity all at once. He wanted to know her story, her past, and why she had chosen to help him and Thunder. But he also knew that trust could not be rushed, that some stories were shared slowly over time. For now, it was enough to be in the presence of someone who had changed the course of his journey and saved the companion he loved so dearly. That night, as John lay on the ground under the stars, he realized something important. This search was no longer just about finding a horse. It was about understanding the world, the people in it, and the bonds that could form in unexpected ways. The Apache woman remained a mystery, but her presence was a gift. Thunder was safe, and John felt a quiet determination to continue learning, following, and understanding the path that had been set before him. For the first time in days, John felt a sense of peace. The search had brought him closer to Thunder, but it had also brought him closer to something far more profound, a connection with a person, a land, and a way of life that he had never known. He fell asleep under the open sky, listening to the distant sounds of the desert, ready for whatever the next day would bring, knowing that the journey was far from over, but that it was already changing him forever. By the time John reached the small clearing where Thunder grazed, he realized that the search had brought him far deeper into the wilderness than he had ever been. The sun hung low over the canyon, turning the rocks golden and casting long shadows across the dry earth. Thunder was calm, his dark coat shining in the sunlight, but it was clear he had been through a lot. His legs bore faint scars and he moved cautiously, still sensitive to the terrain. The woman stood beside him, her hand resting gently on Thunder's mane. Her posture was relaxed, confident, yet there was an air of mystery that made John pause. He had never seen anyone so connected to the land, so attuned to the movements of both animals and nature around them. She looked at John without fear, her eyes calm but alert, as if reading his thoughts. John took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He knew he had to approach carefully. This was a stranger in a foreign land, someone who had saved his horse and yet remained completely unknown to him. One wrong move could frighten Thunder or cause the woman to withdraw. Slowly, he stepped forward, calling Thunder softly. The horse lifted his head, ears pricked but did not move. Instead, he nuzzled the woman's hand, calm and trusting. The woman spoke, her words unfamiliar to John. He didn't understand them, but her tone was gentle. She gestured toward Thunder, then toward John, as if inviting him to come closer but also warning him to move slowly. John nodded, respecting her instructions, and took a few cautious steps forward. He felt a strange mix of awe and gratitude. Here was someone who had saved his most cherished companion, guided him through the wilderness, and yet remained completely independent and mysterious. Over the next hour, John tried to communicate. He spoke softly to Thunder, using the familiar words and whistles that had always calmed him. The horse responded, taking small steps toward John while keeping one eye on the woman. John then attempted to speak to her. "Thank you," he said simply, pointing to Thunder. She nodded slightly, acknowledging him, but said nothing else. Her silence was not rude. It was deliberate, respectful, and intentional. John realized he had a lot to learn from her. He began to observe how she moved through the clearing, how she checked the ground for tracks, how she assessed the surroundings for safety. Every action was purposeful. She gathered water from a small stream nearby, carefully avoiding stepping on fragile plants, and arranged small bundles of dried grass for food. John marveled at her skills. She had lived in the wilderness for years, perhaps even her entire life, and her knowledge of the land and its rhythms was astonishing. As the sun dipped lower, John knew he had to find a way to bring Thunder back safely. He could not force the horse away from her. It would only frighten him. Instead, he decided to gain the woman's trust. Over the next few days, he followed her guidance, learning to navigate the rough terrain without startling the wildlife or disturbing the environment. She showed him small paths that led to water sources, hidden valleys where food was plentiful, and safer routes for traveling with Thunder. During this time, John also began learning subtle lessons about patience and observation. The woman rarely spoke, but her actions communicated more than words ever could. She demonstrated how to move quietly, how to watch the behavior of animals to anticipate danger, and how to read the signs in the landscape. John realized that the wilderness was not just a place to survive. It was a teacher, offering knowledge to those willing to pay attention. One afternoon, as they traveled together through a narrow canyon, John finally found an opportunity to speak more directly. "How did you find him?" he asked, pointing to Thunder. The woman looked at him, then gestured to the horse and to the surrounding land. John understood that she had been tracking Thunder's movements, nursing him back to health, and ensuring he stayed safe. She had risked her own comfort and safety to help a horse she had never met. John felt a profound respect for her courage and generosity. Over time, their communication improved. John began using gestures, simple words, and small drawings in the dirt to convey his thoughts. The woman responded with nods, gestures, and occasional words in her own language, which John could not understand. Despite the language barrier, a bond formed between them. It was built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared goal, keeping Thunder safe and finding a way back to John's homestead. One evening, as they rested near a small spring, John reflected on the journey. He realized that finding Thunder was no longer the only goal. The woman's presence had transformed the search into something greater. He had begun to see the wilderness not as a hostile place, but as a living entity filled with lessons and guidance. The woman had shown him patience, skill, and an understanding of nature that he had never possessed. He admired her strength and wisdom and felt a growing desire to understand her story, even though he knew it might remain a mystery for some time. As night fell, the woman prepared a small fire, careful to gather only enough wood to keep it burning without drawing unnecessary attention. John watched her work, learning how to start a fire using small twigs and dry grass, how to keep it safe, and how to ensure it did not harm the environment. Thunder grazed nearby, calm and content, sensing the peace that had settled over the clearing. John realized that this night, like the others, was a turning point. He had found his horse, but he had also found a teacher, a guide, and perhaps, in some ways, a friend. The next morning John woke early, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange. He prepared for the day's journey, checking on Thunder and ensuring the horse had enough food and water. The woman gestured toward the path that led back to the open plains, indicating that it was time to move. John nodded, understanding that their journey together was nearing a critical point. He felt a mix of anticipation and gratitude. Without her, Thunder might still be lost, and he himself would have been exhausted, frustrated, and defeated. As they traveled, John noticed how the woman guided him around dangerous areas, pointing out unstable rocks, hidden holes, and sharp drops. He marveled at her knowledge and skill. Every movement was precise, deliberate, and confident. John realized that she had lived her life in harmony with the land, understanding its rhythms and respecting its dangers. Her guidance made him feel safer, even in the most treacherous parts of the canyon. During a brief rest, John finally asked, "Who are you?" She looked at him, eyes steady, and spoke a few words in her language. He did not understand, but he sensed meaning. She gestured to herself, then to Thunder, then to John, and finally pointed toward the horizon. John understood that she was guiding him not just to his horse, but back to his home. Her identity remained a mystery, but her intentions were clear. She had saved Thunder, guided him safely, and now was helping him return to the world he had left behind. As the day wore on, John felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude. The bond between him, Thunder, and the woman grew stronger with every step. He realized that life in the wilderness was not just about survival, but about understanding, connection, and trust. The woman's presence had transformed the search into a journey of discovery, not only of the land and its secrets, but of himself. He had learned patience, observation, and humility. He had learned that courage was not just about facing danger, but about acting with care, skill, and wisdom. By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon, John knew they were close to leaving the wilds behind. He looked at the woman, her calm gaze fixed on the path ahead, and felt a surge of gratitude. She had saved Thunder, guided him safely, and taught him lessons he would never forget. The bond they shared was quiet, unspoken, but profound. It was built on trust, respect, and shared experience, a bond that could not be broken by words alone. That night, as they camped under the stars, John felt a sense of peace he had not known in days. Thunder grazed nearby, safe and content, while the woman tended to the fire with skill and care. John reflected on the journey so far, realizing that losing Thunder had led him to something far greater than finding a horse. It had brought him into the presence of someone extraordinary, a guide, a teacher, and a guardian. And though her story remained a mystery, her actions had already changed his life forever. As John drifted to sleep, he knew that the next day would bring them closer to home, but he also knew that the journey had transformed him. He was no longer just a man searching for his lost horse. He was a traveler, a learner, and someone who had discovered the hidden lessons of the wilderness through the guidance of a remarkable woman. Thunder slept peacefully nearby, and John allowed himself a rare moment of rest, knowing that their adventure, though not yet complete, had already left an indelible mark on his heart. The next morning, John woke to the soft light of dawn spilling across the canyon. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and dry earth. Thunder stood nearby, munching on a patch of grass, calm and strong, as if he had regained all his lost energy. The woman, whose presence had become a steady reassurance, prepared a small fire, gathering twigs with careful precision. John noticed how methodically she worked, aware of every movement and its effect on the surroundings. Even without words, she seemed to communicate volumes, lessons about patience, observation, and the quiet rhythm of life in the wilderness. John had thought the hardest part of the journey was finding Thunder, but he now realized that returning safely would be its own challenge. The path back was long, filled with narrow cliffs, hidden ravines, and unpredictable weather. Yet, for the first time since Thunder had disappeared, John felt confident. He was no longer just a man chasing a horse. He was a traveler guided by knowledge, skill, and trust, walking alongside someone whose understanding of the land surpassed anything he had ever known. As they began their journey, the woman led the way, moving lightly across the uneven terrain. John followed closely, studying her every movement. She paused occasionally, pointing out unstable rocks, small animal tracks, or distant clouds that hinted at approaching weather. John absorbed each lesson, realizing that these details could make the difference between safety and disaster. Thunder walked calmly beside him, ears flicking attentively, seeming to sense that his human companions were in good hands. Along the trail, John saw sights he had never noticed before. The canyon walls glimmering with hidden veins of minerals, tiny wildflowers pushing through cracks in the rocks, birds of prey circling high above. The wilderness, which had once seemed harsh and unforgiving, now felt alive and vibrant. He began to appreciate the land not only for its challenges, but also for its beauty, its lessons, and the quiet wisdom it offered to those willing to pay attention. Hours passed as they carefully navigated the rugged terrain. At one point, they came to a narrow ledge that clung to the side of a steep cliff. One misstep could have been fatal. John's heart pounded as he followed the woman, her steps confident and precise. She gestured for him to move slowly, placing his feet exactly where she indicated. Thunder, trained and cautious, followed without hesitation. The woman's guidance transformed what would have been a dangerous crossing into a manageable, even graceful, passage. John realized that her presence was not just protective. It was a teacher, showing him the subtle ways to survive and thrive in the wilderness. By midday, they stopped near a small stream to rest and refresh. The woman demonstrated how to find water safely, using signs in the earth and vegetation to locate hidden pools. John watched carefully, noting how she avoided disturbing the delicate ecosystem. She shared food sparingly, and though she spoke little, her actions communicated lessons about patience, balance, and respect for resources. John began to understand that her skills were born not only of survival, but of deep observation and harmony with nature. As they continued, the path became more challenging. Loose rocks and steep inclines tested their endurance. Thunder's hooves slipped occasionally, but with gentle guidance from both John and the woman, he kept moving forward. John's muscles ached, and sweat stung his eyes, but he felt a growing sense of accomplishment. Every step reinforced his confidence, and every obstacle overcome strengthened the bond between man, horse, and woman. During one brief stop, John finally attempted more direct conversation. "You have amazing skills," he said softly, hoping she would understand. The woman glanced at him, then nodded slightly, her expression calm but unreadable. She did not speak, but her gestures and attention conveyed approval. John realized that actions often spoke louder than words, and that the trust they had built in silence was more powerful than any conversation. As evening approached, clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and heavy. A storm was approaching, and John knew that the final stretch back to his homestead would be the most difficult part of their journey. The woman signaled to him to move quickly but carefully. She led them along a hidden path that avoided the worst of the cliffs, using her knowledge to find the safest route. Thunder picked up his pace, guided by her steady presence. John felt a surge of gratitude and respect. Without her, navigating this terrain safely would have been nearly impossible. Rain began to fall lightly, and the wind picked up, rattling loose branches and making the rocks slippery. John gripped Thunder's reins tightly, focusing on every step. The woman stayed close, her eyes scanning the landscape for hidden dangers. She occasionally touched Thunder, calming him and ensuring he stayed steady. John realized that this journey was no longer just about returning home. It was a test of endurance, trust, and teamwork. Each of them, man, horse, and woman, relied on the others for safety and guidance. Night fell, and the storm intensified. Lightning illuminated the canyon in brief flashes, followed by distant rumbles of thunder. The path became even more treacherous, but the woman remained calm and focused. She led them to a small overhang where they could shelter from the worst of the storm. John huddled close, his heart still pounding, but he felt a profound sense of respect and gratitude for the woman who had guided them here. Thunder stayed calm, sensing the safety provided by her presence. The following morning, the storm had passed, leaving the canyon glistening with rain-soaked rocks and streams running clear with fresh water. John felt renewed energy as they continued the journey. The woman's guidance remained invaluable. She pointed out safe paths, hidden water sources, and areas where the terrain was firm enough to cross without risk. John marveled at her skill and knowledge, realizing that her presence had transformed this journey from a simple search for a lost horse into a life-changing experience. As they descended toward the open plains, John noticed familiar landmarks in the distance, rolling hills, distant trees, and the outline of his homestead. A mix of relief and anticipation surged through him. He knew the hardest part of the journey was over, but returning home would bring its own challenges. People would have questions, curiosity, and perhaps even fear about the mysterious woman traveling with him. Yet, John felt confident. He knew the bond they had formed, the lessons learned, and the trust built in the wilderness would guide them through whatever awaited. By midday, they reached the edge of the plains. Thunder picked up his pace, as if sensing the familiar ground. John felt a swell of joy and relief. The journey had tested him in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But he had learned, grown, and discovered a new understanding of life in the wilderness. The woman remained by his side, calm and steady, a silent companion who had guided him through challenges he could not have faced alone. Finally, the homestead came into view. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the familiar outline of the barn and fields filled John with a deep sense of homecoming. Neighbors and friends who had heard rumors of his search began to gather, their faces a mixture of curiosity and surprise. They stared at the scene before them, John leading Thunder healthy and strong and the mysterious woman walking beside him calm and composed. Whispers ran through the crowd. Who was she? How had she helped him? Questions filled the air, but John said nothing at first. He simply approached the barn, ensuring Thunder was settled and fed. Once Thunder was secure, John finally turned to the woman. "Thank you," he said sincerely, his voice filled with emotion. She nodded, a quiet smile on her face, acknowledging his words without needing more. In that moment, John realized that their bond did not need explanation. Actions had spoken louder than words throughout the journey, and their connection was already understood. Over the next days, the woman stayed at the homestead, helping John with small tasks, teaching him more about the land, tracking, and survival skills. The neighbors, initially wary, gradually came to respect her presence. They saw how she had guided John and Thunder safely through the wilderness, and they could not help but admire her skill and courage. John felt a sense of pride, not in himself alone, but in the journey he had shared with her, a journey that had changed him forever. By the end of the week, John realized that life would never be the same. Thunder had returned, safe and strong, but the true gift of the journey was the wisdom, guidance, and friendship he had found in the mysterious woman. She had led him through danger, taught him to observe, respect, and survive, and in doing so had become an inseparable part of his life. John knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, the lessons learned and the bond formed in the wilderness would remain with him forever. As night fell over the homestead, John sat by the fire, reflecting on the journey. The storm, the canyon, the lost days of searching, all of it had led to this moment. Thunder slept peacefully nearby, and the woman, calm and composed, tended the fire with careful hands. John understood that the journey had been about more than a lost horse. It had been about trust, courage, respect, and connection. He felt a quiet gratitude for the woman who had changed the course of his life, guiding him not only to his horse, but to a deeper understanding of the world around him. After returning home, John finally had a moment to breathe. The familiar sights and sounds of his homestead, the wooden fence, the barn, the open fields, filled him with relief and comfort. Thunder nuzzled him gently, as if thanking him for the journey they had shared, and John felt a deep bond stronger than ever. But his mind was also filled with thoughts of the mysterious woman who had accompanied him. She had been quiet, calm, and skilled, guiding them through dangers he could never have faced alone. Without her, he knew Thunder might still have been lost, and he might still be wandering the wilderness, exhausted and hopeless. Over the following days, John slowly returned to his daily routines. He worked on the ranch, tending the cattle and repairing fences, but everything felt different. Life had gained new meaning. The woman remained at the homestead, though she did not interfere with his work. She moved silently, assisting when needed, and often disappeared into the surrounding land to gather water, check for wild animals, or simply observe nature. Her presence brought a calm sense of order, as if the wilderness itself had followed her home. John found himself watching her more than he realized. She was skilled, strong, and completely independent, yet there was a quiet grace in her movements. He wanted to know her story, but he understood that some things could not be rushed. She would share her past in time, if at all. For now, he was grateful for the lessons she offered through her actions, her guidance, and her steady presence. The neighbors, initially wary and curious, soon came to respect her. They saw how she had rescued Thunder, guided John safely through the canyon, and demonstrated survival skills that seemed almost magical to those who had spent their lives on the plains. Some tried to speak to her, offering food or small gifts, but she accepted politely and silently, never demanding attention. Her quiet confidence and skill earned their admiration. Even children, usually fearless and playful, approached her cautiously, sensing both safety and strength in her calm demeanor. John began spending more time with her, not only learning practical skills but also discovering lessons about patience, trust, and understanding. She showed him how to observe the land, notice signs that most people would overlook, and move through nature without causing harm. John realized that these lessons were not just useful for survival, they were lessons for life. Patience, observation, respect, and humility were values he had never fully appreciated until now. Thunder thrived in this new environment. With the woman's guidance, John learned how to care for him more carefully, how to check his hooves, groom him properly, and feed him in ways that strengthened his health. The horse, once frightened and exhausted, regained his strength and confidence. He seemed to sense that this woman had played a key role in saving him, and he remained calm and obedient under her presence. John often watched them together, feeling a mixture of gratitude and wonder at the bond they shared. As weeks passed, John's connection with the woman deepened. They still did not speak much, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. She taught him not only survival skills but also ways to connect with the land and its creatures. He learned to notice small signs, a bent branch indicating a hidden path, a distant sound suggesting the presence of an animal, or the pattern of clouds hinting at upcoming weather changes. John realized that life could be lived more fully if one paid attention to the small, often overlooked details. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with oranges and pinks, John and the woman stood by the stable, watching Thunder graze. The horse lifted his head, ears pricked, and nuzzled John's hand. John smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The journey to find Thunder had been arduous and challenging, but it had led to something far greater, a friendship and partnership with a remarkable woman who had changed his life forever. Over time, the woman became part of the homestead's life. She taught John ways to improve the ranch, how to track cattle more efficiently, recognize signs of illness, and prepare for natural challenges like storms or droughts. Her knowledge of the land and its rhythms was unparalleled. John realized that she had spent her life observing, learning, and understanding the world in ways he could never have imagined. He felt humbled and grateful to have her guidance and companionship. The neighbors eventually accepted her presence fully. They came to respect her as someone extraordinary, someone who had rescued a beloved horse, guided a man safely through the wilderness, and demonstrated wisdom far beyond her years. Some whispered about her mysterious past, but John did not care for the gossip. He knew that what mattered most was the bond they shared, the lessons she had taught him, and the safety and trust she had brought to his life and his homestead. One morning, John realized that the woman had transformed not only his life, but also his perspective. He saw the land differently, appreciated the small wonders of nature, and understood the value of patience and observation. Thunder's health and spirit reflected the care and guidance she had provided. John often thought about the canyon, the long search, and the stormy nights, realizing that every challenge had been a step toward this new way of life. The woman, though still mysterious, began to open up slowly. She shared small stories of her life, often through gestures or simple words, teaching John about her culture, her experiences, and her respect for the land. John listened attentively, learning to understand her world and the wisdom she carried. He realized that while he had searched for a lost horse, he had found a guide, a teacher, and a companion whose influence would stay with him forever. Over the following months, life at the homestead settled into a harmonious rhythm. Thunder thrived, John worked more efficiently, and the woman's presence brought a balance and calm to the daily routines. John often reflected on the journey, the lost horse, the mysterious woman, and the lessons of patience, trust, and respect. He understood that sometimes loss leads to discovery, and unexpected encounters can transform life in ways no one anticipates. John also discovered the quiet joy of companionship without words. The woman did not need to speak much for them to understand each other. Her actions, gestures, and presence conveyed trust, respect, and wisdom. John felt that their bond went beyond friendship. It was a partnership, built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and a deep understanding of the world around them. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched across the fields, John stood beside Thunder, watching the horse move freely, strong and healthy. The woman approached quietly, standing beside him. For a moment, they both simply watched the land, the animals, and the setting sun. There was a sense of peace, of understanding, and of gratitude. John realized that this journey had not only returned Thunder, but had also returned something far more important, an understanding of life, trust, and connection. The woman eventually agreed to stay longer, teaching John more about tracking, survival, and observation. She became a teacher in ways he had never anticipated, sharing wisdom that extended far beyond ranch work. John absorbed each lesson, recognizing that the journey with Thunder and the mysterious woman had changed him profoundly. He had grown more patient, observant, and respectful, not only of the land but of the people and creatures around him. Over time, John came to understand that the true value of the journey was not just in finding Thunder, but in the relationships and lessons formed along the way. The woman had guided him through dangers, taught him respect for nature, and shown him that courage and wisdom often come quietly, through actions rather than words. She had become a central figure in his life, shaping not only the ranch's success, but also his own growth as a man. As months turned into years, Thunder remained a loyal and strong companion, and the woman continued to guide John, helping him navigate challenges and teaching him new ways to understand the land. The homestead flourished, not only because of John's hard work, but because of the knowledge, skill, and wisdom brought by the mysterious woman. John often reflected on the day he lost his horse, realizing that what had seemed like a tragedy had been the beginning of an incredible journey that brought growth, understanding, and lasting companionship. John realized that life had a way of leading people to unexpected places and connections. Losing Thunder had been painful, but it had led him to someone extraordinary, a woman who changed his life forever. The bond they formed was quiet but unbreakable, built on trust, shared experiences, and respect. It was a reminder that life often rewards patience, courage, and openness to the unknown. Years later, John would tell stories of the lost horse, the dangerous canyon, and the mysterious woman who had appeared at just the right moment. The neighbors and friends would listen in awe, fascinated by the tale of bravery, trust, and wisdom. But John knew that the most important part of the story was not the adventure itself, but the lessons he had learned, the trust he had earned, and the lasting bond that changed his life forever. In the end, John understood that the journey was never just about finding a horse. It was about discovering patience, courage, respect, and trust. It was about forming connections that transcended words. It was about life's unexpected gifts, waiting quietly, ready to transform those willing to embrace them. The woman, the wilderness, and Thunder had shown him that sometimes the greatest discoveries come after the hardest challenges, and that life's true treasures are often found in moments of trust, guidance, and companionship. John looked at Thunder grazing in the fading light and then at the woman standing calmly nearby. A quiet smile crossed his face. He understood fully that this journey had been more than a search for a lost horse. It had been a journey of life, growth, and discovery. And in that moment, surrounded by the calm of the homestead, John knew that he had truly come home.